So we have the pleasure to be joined today by Anne Swinton, better known as the reggae dancehall veteran Rankin Ann. Rankin Ann's musical roots sprouted in the late 70s as she performed at dances all over London with her brother's sound system. From there, with a name being made as a tough female DJ, Rankin Ann recorded her debut single Liberated Woman, paving the way with her signature style and lyricism, culminating in the release of her first studio album produced by Mad Proffesor, A Slice of English Toast, released on the Ariwa record label in 1982. 2 years later, after touring the UK alongside the Ariwa Posse, came her second studio album, Something Fishy Going On, leading to another tour with the Ariwa Posse, this time around Europe. With this momentum, Anne went on to continue releasing music, making television appearances and using her stage to speak out on relevant and social political issues. So Anne, welcome and thanks for joining us here on Real Roots Radio.
Thank you.
So, like I said, now I've introduced you to our listeners, I thought perhaps it would also make sense to, let you introduce yourself as well. So, in your own words, who is Rankin Ann?
Okay, Rankin Ann, I was an original toaster from back in the days when MCing and DJing was called toasting. Mm-hmm. I came up from quite a young age on the kind of South London base. I had a little bit of experience on like local sound systems, but my major break was when I started recording for Ariwa Sounds, which was another South London record label stroke studio with Mad Proffesor, and I recorded quite a number of tracks there, and an album was put out for me in 1982, my first album. It was called A Slice of English Toast.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was where it started for me.
Okay. So if we start all the way back at the beginning, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in the UK to Jamaican parents, so my heritage is Jamaican through and through. Mm-hmm. I'm the youngest of three children and the only one in the family born in the UK. Okay. Grew up in South London. Pretty much all my life, haven't moved away from there more than when I sort of went away to uni for 3 years. And that's been my base. Obviously, I've travelled, to different countries and Jamaica especially. Yeah. But yeah, more or less based in South London. All
right. So when and how was it that reggae, in its most impactful way, made its way into your life?
Well, we weren't a reggae family because I come from a very strict Jamaican Pentecostal church, upbringing, which means reggae was not part of the culture. But my brother, who's a few years older than me, had a sound system, and he would sort of bring back some of the tunes when he bought them, like the pre-releases, right, play them on what we call the gram, the old time grams. Okay. And he would play his tunes, and I would hear these tunes, and it would be wow. This was like, it really hit me in that I could relate to this music, more than the pop music that I used to hear, played on the radio as a young child. Reggae was like, I could relate to it, the beat, the vibe. And then when he started playing like toasting tunes, and then he played dubs, that was when it's like, wow, this is something that really I relate to. And then I would ask him if he could sort of leave some of his tunes for me to play when he wasn't around. Right. And I would find myself playing the dub sides of these tunes. I mean, I love the lyrics and whatever, but the dub was what really spoke to me. And from just playing dubs kind of over and over, I would find that I would be inspired to sort of check my own little lyrics. Might be like one line here, 2 lines there, but it was just like a natural flow. Dub spoke to me and the lyrics came.
And about how old were you been at that time when you just started discovering it and listening to it and testing out your abilities?
I think I would have been sort of 16-ish when I started to just do the little kind of chatting in the front room to myself. Yeah. So yeah, it would have been about, it would have been like, yeah, I would have been about 16, 17. And then, by the time I was kind of like 18, that's when I started to kind of chat on my brother's sound, and then on 1 and 2 little local sounds that was doing like blues dances around the place.
So about your more direct musical influence, who were the DJs or the singers that you listened to that really helped you form your specific style on the mic? Are there any that come to mind specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think the early ones, people like Trinity, people like Big Youth, because those were two. I had a tune, Big Youth tune, which was Hit the Road Jack, Trinity tune, 3-piece suit. Those I could play those over and over again. So those were like just kind of part of my culture growing into reggae. And then you had Linton Kwesi Johnson, who was kind of around that same era. And it was like his kind of, hard driving lyrics that really kind of spoke to me. And then you had people like General Echo, who came a little bit later for me. But what I loved about Echo was he had a way of just being very sort of drama based around his lyrics, like making up storylines and different characters. And that combination of those kind of, early DJs, early toasters, people like Jack Thomas also, that kind of early dancehall kind of lightheartedness. Just a combination of hearing all those kind of DJs really sort of spoke to me. And some of my early tunes, you can even hear those influences in some of my really early tunes.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Here come the man named Papa Lighty with the Dread Controller. Papa Khalid, I'm a Casanova. You have Robert, I'm a romancer. Rankin Trevor, I'm a drink lover. Papa Junior, the cool ruler. Rankin B, the mic MC. You have Brian, I'm a technician. Then come Carl, Ace Mike Man, and then come Rankin Ann. So what can you tell us about Black Rock?
Oh my gosh, you're so good that you can quote that. Wow, I'm so impressed.
Wow, thank you.
Black Rock was my brother's sound. That was his sound system. And I made that tune about all the characters who were part of the sound system. And every name you called was a real person, and every character you named was how they flexed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it was just a joy to write that tune, because it was easy, because I knew the guys, and it was actually based on an actual dance. They had a particular night when they did this dance. And even the latter part of the tune that talks about my part that I played, it was all based on a true incident or event. So Black Rock Posse was the sound system, I have to say, gave me the kind of initial chance to realise that I could chat on the mic. Because it was my brother that allowed me to chat on the mic. When I started to chat, people saying, "What? And you're ranking?" And and it's like, "Oh, that's my name. That's going to be my name." So it was. I have to say, give thanks to Black Rock, because they helped me to realise that I had a gift that I could use.
All right, for real. It's also my favourite tune on the
seriously
Slice of English Toast album. Yeah, this tune's serious.
Yeah.
Now,
but it's got a solid backing track. That kind of Horisandi backdrop backing track. I'm not sure if you know it's an old Horisandi tune.
All right.
But yeah, it's a solid track.
Yeah, one of my favourites. So, could you describe for us just a little bit? So you told us about, your brother bringing home these records, and you play them. You begin to chat a little. And then your brother gives you the mic and you start to chat. When you did that for the first time, was that quite nerve-wracking? Were you concerned about the reception? Were you ready to go? How was that the first time?
The funny thing is, the first time, I think I only had about 2 or 3 lines to repeat over and over again, but it just felt really natural. And I think because it was a dance with people that I knew, because I knew the Black Rock Posse guys, and it was like a kind of house party kind of setting. So I felt quite relaxed. And I think what was nice is that as soon as I started to chat, I got the kind of accolades of, wow, everyone was surprised that I could do it and do it well.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of boosted my confidence quite quickly, So I felt very comfortable with the mic in my hands from a very early point.
All right. So maybe you can tell us a bit about how the transition came about from performing live or on the sound system to recording an album with Mad Proffesor at Ariwa, because that's pretty big, you know?
Yeah, and once again, it was kind of like by default, because I used to buy my records every week from the local. We only had one reggae shop in Croydon where I lived. I'd go there every week, me and my sister in, and she just happened to mention her name Nubiana to the guy selling the record that, oh, you know, my friend can chat. So because I wasn't the sort of person that would big up myself. That just wasn't who I was.
Yeah.
So when he said that to this man in the record shop, he said, I've got a friend, you know, a producer friend who's looking for new talent. So put some of your stuff down on a cassette and I'll let him hear it and we'll see what happens. I did that. I had a cassette, run some, it was back, my big thing then was Scientist Steppers dub. I mean, I could do like a million versions on that tune. I love that dub so much. And I did that, and I ran that dub for, you know, on the cassette. And went back to the shop, and the man in the shop said, well, you know, this man likes what he heard. Yeah. And he said, can you know, get down to the studio, gave me the address to the studio. I didn't know who the producer was, I had no idea who it was. And when it was in a front room, someone's front room. And when I got there, it was Neil Fraser, my professor.
Wow.
And, you know, he just started to run. He had a whole different lot of tracks. He started to run the tracks. And I was just like, top of my head, just went into the voicing box and started to voice tunes. Just like how when you're around the sound, you just run lyrics. And it just came naturally. And what was really great for me is that for the first time, having headphones on, I could actually hear how I sounded.
Right.
Because prior to that, you don't know how you sound when you're just doing it out there. But when I heard how I sounded, like, it even gave me more confidence. It's like, I like how I sound, you know. And it
Brilliant. Yeah.
And it was just a natural flow. And I think if you ever listen to a tune called Conscious Man, that was one of the first tunes I did at Ariwa. It was just like just a flow of lyrics from top to bottom, you know, just one take. And it's like, it was just a very comfortable, exciting, you know, experience for me. And I did quite a few of those kind of voices for Ariwa. And eventually he put a few on an album, and that was how the first album came about.
Brilliant. Incredible. Now, in relation to your lyrical content, reggae music is, you know, often intertwined with messages of political and social movements, particularly and most often in terms of things like religious freedom, racial equality and justice. Now, throughout your recording career, we've heard some great examples where you've chosen to provide another viewpoint on justice and equality from a woman's point of view, with classics such as Liberated Woman and Feminine Gender. So, can you tell us about what motivated you to start speaking to this subject in your music?
For me, it was just a very natural expression of my background. As I said, I came from a very strict religious background where basically you had a set of rules that you stuck by the rules, you know, which didn't give, as a young person growing up, not a lot of freedom. You know, it was about going to church and living a certain lifestyle.
Right.
I was finding for me that it didn't give me any freedom to be myself. And when I did manage to sort of break away from that and start going to parties and meeting other young people who are living a different kind of lifestyle, I also realized at that point that even though young people had a level of freedom, you still had, especially I'm talking about the females now, had young women who were kind of controlled by their boyfriends. So they dressed the way their boyfriend wanted them to dress. They would only talk to who their boyfriend had them to talk to. They would only go where they were told to go. And if they didn't obey, they might get a slap. And when I realized that you had young people who I thought were free living under this kind of bondage, it made me think this feels really wrong. And I felt very strongly about freedom, personal freedom. And when I see people, you know, kept on a level that's not fair or unjust, I feel very strongly about it. So because I wasn't a very expressive teenager, I didn't talk a lot about things that upset me or that I thought about. But when I started to write lyrics, I could put it in lyrics and express it really clearly how I felt.
Right.
So that's why when I wrote Liberated Woman, it was all about my personal thing about I felt repressed, being in a relationship with a young man who had certain rules, and then seeing other women who were kind of also oppressed because of their gender. And I'm just saying, no, this is wrong. We should be allowed to be free to be who we are. I said, free like a bird in the tree.
Yeah.
Let me function. Let me be who I am.
Yes.
So Liberated Woman was very much a cry of, freedom cry, if you like, to just to be allowed to be ourselves as women. And then Feminine Gender was like a kind of a later anthem to the same thing, but just a kind of more mature look at, the way, women were often treated, once again, by men, but and society in general, and society, and not just the one we live in, right across the world. Society historically has always kept women down as the underdog, the second class or the third class citizen. And it hasn't actually changed a lot because women are still having to fight in many ways to assert themselves on an equal footing.
Right, absolutely. Well, you also chat in your lyrics about your identity as well, namely in your track Feminine Gender, where you say, is it true what them say, that you are feminist? You say, no, Rasta, I'm an individualist. Is it that you felt there was any kind of stigma surrounding that label at the time, or did you just find it of importance to define yourself as opposed to being defined?
What it was, that's once again down to a specific experience I had. Sometimes people, don't realize that the lyrics they're hearing are based on a specific experience. So I was actually at a party, and another DJ who's now, well known on the circuit. He had seen me on the circuit over the years, and he had probably just seen me as a young woman that kind of out and about, not necessarily hooked up with a man, but out with, a group of friends.
Yep.
And he came up to me and he basically said to me, are you a feminist? But when he said it, he specifically was asking me, are you a lesbian? Because he's never seen me with a boyfriend. And I think, you have a kind of mentality of men who think that unless you've got a man on your arm or on a man's arm, then you've got to be a lesbian.
Right.
So my response to him, and that was a very specific response, I said to him, I'm not a feminist, I'm not a lesbian, because that was what he used. He used it, as a term to kind of tone down what he was asking me.
I see.
I said, I'm an individualist. I do things the way I like to do, which is like I like to move with a group of friends and just go out and go around and be out and about in the circle I like to move in. In terms of feminist, I'm the eternal feminist, because I will never stop, saying that we need to ensure that women have equal opportunities and equal rights to, in terms of social, political, emotional, So I am the eternal feminist. But what I really disagree with is when you have people, and I have to say men, they use the term feminist to pocket hole you into something that you're not, which is feminist equals anti-man. Feminist equal, you're acting like a man, and I'm saying, really, we've got to stop those kind of ignorant ways of defining people, defining women, and it's going on. When you have all these platforms now with these men who are just really anti-feminist because of how they define feminism, it does make me feel really upset. So I'm saying, you have taken a term that is empowering for women and made it into something that, it's almost derogatory when you call a woman a feminist now. So that was why I made that very clear in the song, that I am who I am. I flex how I flex, but don't actually come and label me, because I'm an individual and I'm not the person that you're trying to make me out to be.
Right on. Absolutely. Well, speaking of your track again, Feminine Gender, there's a brilliant recording of you in 1986 performing Feminine Gender on, I believe it was Channel 4's Black on Black television programme with Saxon Sound System. And
that was actually 85. Yes, I love that clip. Yes, absolutely.
I could tell you're having fun in it, right? We can see you on stage in front of the audience, mic in hand, full of confidence and energy. And we even see you gas up the crowd at one point with some moves. So my question is, when your career started moving along and you find yourself in front of crowds, television cameras, things being recorded, was that, how did you handle that? Was it a big step up for you in terms of how it would affect your confidence, or again, was it just in the stride?
That particular TV appearance was a kind of mixed experience for me, because I remember that was the first time I'd been on TV, and they said to me, it's a one take, you can't afford to get it wrong. And the Saxon guys that you can see standing around, the outside, they were really, the vibes I was getting from them was one of, like, they couldn't really understand what I was doing there, because they don't know me as an MC, and the way I look when I'm not on, performing is like someone who can't do much. So their response to me was like, don't F it up when you go on there. There was no encouragement, going on to camera.
I see.
And as I said, it was one take, so I had to get it right. But the funny thing is, as soon as I started, and it's like the audience, that, what you get from the audience, that kind of energy that comes from the audience, that makes it for me. And once I see the audience and make eye contact, I'm in a different zone altogether. And, whatever was said to me before by the Saxon guy just went totally out of my head. It's just about doing this thing, this audience that people I could see were absolutely just responding. Yeah. And the more they respond, the more it fired me, And it was just, I didn't think I was going to get through it, but I did. And I enjoyed that so much, It was just a wonderful experience. It was a great experience.
It's super interesting that you say that, because from the video, I could notice all of that. I could see the Saxon guys behind, they had a certain face on. And you could see the crowd in front absolutely loving it, and the energy was brilliant. It's a great piece of tape for sure.
And it's sad because once again it reflected, sorry to cut you, it reflected just the whole male-female thing, the way the males, kind of looked at women in reggae, especially in the dance hall kind of thing. And I just think they've always had that thing of the women are never quite as good as, And I don't know if that's changed now because I'm not on the circuit anymore, but I think that was quite sad that rather than having encouragement, from these established, male MCs, it was that kind of attitude,
Well, that was one of my questions as well. Did you find when you got there that was something that was quite present? The fact that a male-dominated thing, being a MC, being a woman doing it, was that quite present? Did you feel?
Yes, it was always very present.
Right.
And I think I would say more so for me because of the content and style of how I was emceeing. You had women who were emceeing like the men, doing the same kind of lyrical content, the same kind of flash it styles, those kind of sound system styles. Yeah. I never really got into that because that didn't really draw me. So you found that because I was doing the kind of more serious lyrics and in a different kind of style where it was actually giving you a storyline, giving you information, the men didn't necessarily relate to what I was doing, what I was saying. And then when you had the content that was what they felt was putting men down, that even distanced them more from me. So I never really got any kind of, I say, male support in this country, but it's only when I started to tour in Europe that I realised that actually there's a few men that actually understand where I'm coming from and appreciate the content and style of what I'm doing.
Okay. So really, it's quite courageous, basically.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the truth. It was actually quite a lonely journey because, as I said, I never had the kind of backing from anybody in the industry, obviously apart from recording with Ariwa. But outside of that, there was no real kind of support, whereas I know that some of the female MCs, they kind of latched on to different sound systems and, they were given that kind of, boost. But I never had anyone in the industry back in that time that was supporting me, and it was quite lonely. It was quite lonely when I tried to kind of branch out and maybe find other people to work with in the reggae industry. There wasn't anybody that was really willing to to work with me.
I see. Well, and let's talk about Kill the Police Bill then. So you released a track in 1984 called Kill the Police Bill. Can you tell us about the circumstances surrounding this track's creation and also a little bit about its reception?
Kill the Police Bill, that came about through, there was a body called the GLC, the Great London Council, which is the local authority, and they had a police support unit. And these guys, their thing was to kind of look at police policies and kind of just make sure that these policies were fit for purpose.
Yeah.
When this bill that was about to become law, the police full pay, so I can't remember the whole thing now, but it was about to become law, and they realised that within this law, it was going to be really kind of detrimental, especially for young black men, but just people in general that were poor people who were just trying to, just live an ordinary life, and especially if you're just trying to do a little hustling on the side. The police powers were increased so much that they would be able to just do more or less anything they liked with you, arrest you, not particularly charge you, hold you for hours, do internal searches. And it was actually quite a frightening law, which people weren't aware was going to, come on the statute books. And these guys were saying that they need to kind of alert the public to what's to come, so the public could be saying, no, we don't want this law, So they thought the best way to inform, especially young people, was to put it, in a popular medium like reggae music. So I worked with, a team of guys from this unit. They gave me information about what was going to be in this police bill before it became law. And then based on the information they gave me, I wrote the lyrics around what they told me would be, part of this law to come. Wow. And they were telling me the implications of the law. As you can see, it's had many implications, which we're now seeing, today in the way people are being treated by police today. So they wanted, as I said, to kind of make it a thing for young people to have knowledge about what was to come and educate young people. And they did put, there's obviously they put a lot of, when I say a lot, they put some money behind it. There was some level of promotion, which had people like Ken Livingstone, who was the head of the GLC back then, wow. People like Paul Boateng, a Labour MP, and other people that, had a name at the time. Okay. But, we know the government being the government will always push through what they want to push through. And in the end, it still got through. But it was just all about trying to alert people, but particularly young people, to what was to come if they didn't stop it then.
Now, moving on 6 years, in the 90s, you worked on some fantastic collaborations with Scritti Politti for Flesh and Blood and Silent Poets for Shalom, which, by the way, is my absolute favourite track right now. I'm waiting for my copy to arrive in the mail as we speak, and when it arrives,
oh wow,
I'm not going to stop playing it. But
wow, I must say, Bill, I love Shalom. It's one of those tunes that, even though it's my tune, I can put that on repeat and it just does something for me.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, I'd never heard of Silent Poets before, and I think they were working with Ariwa, and I guess they asked if he had anybody that they thought might work with them. Yeah. And he proposed, he put me forward, and I had this track which I wasn't quite sure what to do with it, because it was an unusual kind of backing track for me in terms of the genre. I didn't really kind of place quite what it was. But I'm a person, I would play something on repeat until it talks to me. And I just kept playing it on repeat, the dub this is, until it started to speak to me. And it's just, wow. It's just one of those kind of inspirational tracks in terms of the words that were coming from within me, And I think at the time I was in church and I was a committed Christian. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the kind of ethos and ethics came from the kind of biblical thing of, what that was talking about, the shalom, the peace, and just trying to live a life, a good life, not get caught up in things that are going to drag you down, and there's something about that whole kind of vibe of that tune that it just is just uplifting, really uplifting.
I think uplifting is the word, It's It's just interesting because it's light on melody. It has that little piano thing in there, but combine that with the bass line and then your vocals riding on top. Oh my lord. Absolute favourite tune. Alas, the 90s was the decade that saw you performing in Jamaica. So, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, as I said, the 90s, for the whole of the 90s, I had kind of left the secular circuit and gone onto the gospel circuit. And I coined this phrase, and I will say I was a pioneer of gospel Ragga, because I took my style into church. And in those days, they didn't have those styles in church.
Yeah.
When I did the first song that I did was it was like a pepper seed rhythm. It was like that rhythm. And when I got up on the stage and did this tune, I saw the ladies with the big hats get up and walk out of church. They thought, this is not, and I saw them, it was just, they were so upset that I had come into their sacred church and was singing these types of songs. But the great thing was, the young people, they loved it.
They listened.
And I saw some young people just start to shock out, and there was a sense of freedom. I said, you know what? For every person that's walked out, the 1 and 2, that's okay. The rest of people who was loving it, and I knew it was coming from a place of conviction in what I believed in. And I did a whole heap of church circuits in this country, and I was also privileged to go and do a festival in Jamaica. And that for me was a great time, because I got to meet a lot of different people. I got to, to see people who were just kind of, what I'm going to say, dried up in church, literally dried up, come alive when they heard me. And it was just wonderful to see the place literally catch a fire when I do my things. And that's what I think, for me, that's what it's about. When I'm doing music, it's got to touch people in a real way. And I know I saw people literally touched with the gospel Ragga, so.
Well, honestly, I think if that's what was going on in my local churches, I think you'd see me there a lot more often. Honestly. Now, let's bring things forward a little bit. So you released a new tune with Red Robin called Jelous Man in 2018, a counteraction to Midnight Rider's version titled Jealous Woman on the same 12-inch. Now, I believe I've told you this before, but I really love this tune musically, but also lyrically, because the way I look at it, it points out plainly how jealousy and toxicity in a relationship affects women as well, all too often in the form of violence, because, through rocksteady to lovers rock and dancehall, the narrative we're quite used to hearing is a man's heart being broken, being hurt or being done wrong by his girl. So I found Jelous Man particularly poignant. So can you tell us how your experience was working with Red Robin recently, and also what was your approach to writing Jelous Man?
That's really interesting you should say that, because when Red Robin approached me and said, could you do like a combination to Jealous Woman? And when I listened to the Jealous Woman track, it was like quite light-hearted, and I thought, okay, I'll do a little kind of light-hearted response. When I started to write it, it started to get deep. It started to get, and I started to kind of touch back on things that I had experienced. In terms of the violence,
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? The thing about jealousy, it's not just a kind of superficial thing. That can be detrimental. And I've read about, women who've actually lost their lives because, a man was jealous about, what he thought was happening and took the life of that woman. And when I started to write, I thought, no, this is a serious song. It's a serious song. And it did relate to an experience that I had when I was a very young woman. And it was like the first time, because I've never spoken about what I'd experienced in terms of, an assault down to jealousy. And when I wrote that song and sung it, it was like therapy for me, because for the first time I was able to release what had happened to me. And I know something that probably women had experienced all over the world, you know, where there had been the victims of violence because of, you know, a man's toxicity, as you said, or just simply jealous, you know, and usually for no good reason. Often it was unfounded. When women got slapped or beaten for these things, it was usually quite unfounded. And when I did the song, I thought, wow, I didn't know it was going to be so deep and so serious, but I just thought it had to go where it had to go, you know.
All right, amazing. Well, this is my last question now, and this is something I'm personally quite curious about, really. So in your track Moonlight Lover, featured on the Slice of English Toast LP, every time I listen to this track, I like it. It's a little bit more experimental to me, kinda, but we hear some singing in what appears to be a different language. Am I right? And if so, what language is this?
Right, the first thing I'm going to say is the singer is not me. It's a woman called Asha. And I was made to understand that she was singing in Punjabi. I can't say yes or no. That's what I was told at the time.
Okay.
Now, in all honesty, as soon as you mentioned Moonlight Lover, I love that track, but not the version that had the singing on it, because I was never consulted about how that track went out. It was just put out on the album.
Right.
And every time I heard it, I actually was quite angry, because I said to myself, that's fine if you want to put, you know, Asha on her own track, but for you to mix it in with my track, I was never happy. So if you find the version that's on the Ariwa Sound 1981, I think it's called Ariwa Sound, it's a different version. It doesn't have Asha's voice in it. But I was never happy about that particular mix, the way that was mixed in. And as you said, it was experimental. And my feeling at the time was, why would you, you know, use your experimental ways with a track that I personally loved, you know, because the original song, if you hear it on the other version, which I said is on the 1981 Ariwa Sounds album, if you hear that version, it's straight through my lyrics, and it's once again it's telling a story, because my songs they do tell a story. So you know, you said you like it, which okay, that's great, but for me that's one of the kind of thorns in my side. When I think about that particular track on my album, I get very unhappy about it.
I see. Well, I think I'll have to go hear the original, really, because, you know, I'll be very curious to hear what that was like now that you mentioned it.
Yeah, I mean, the album, I know you can find it on YouTube. I don't know if it's still available, but I know you can find it on YouTube. If you put Ariwa Sounds 1981 early sessions, it will come up on there. And it's in combination with the original track is Love in Your Heart.
Okay.
And that's really a beautiful song. And then you've got Moonlight Lover coming on the back end of that. So yeah, if you've got time to find that version, now that's me. I do love Moonlight Lover. And the thing is, a lot of people don't realise that Rankin does sing love songs. I do sing love songs.
Love on a Mountain Top, right?
There you go. You know the stuff.
Of course. So on. Thank you so much for joining me here on realrootsradio.net. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I just have one more thing to ask before you leave us. And that is, which track of yours do you think I should play for our listeners now?
You know, there's a track that no one ever plays because it's not really reggae, the reggae genre. But you mentioned it, which is Flesh and Blood by Scritti Politti.
Okay.
And why I love that track is that, once again, it speaks to me and women all over the world. I've heard women say this particular track, it's really liberating, you know. So if you could play Flesh and Blood, I would really appreciate that.
I would absolutely love to. All right. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wicked evening. Hope you enjoyed the interview. And once again, thank you so much for giving us some of your time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you. So you take care. Have a good evening yourself.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay then. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Some crucial but